Metal tombs drifting around the gateway, mute witnesses to their futile efforts. And everywhere we went the dead awaited us, our erstwhile companions and silent judges. No uniformity graced their bones. Ships of nearly every species and make reflected among the carnage. Then a flash, a wave of radiation, the telltale signs of an incoming vessel. Then an explosion. Silence. I nearly wept in relief as my escape pod crawled into the FDL communication area that surrounded the gateway. My emergency beacon could now link to the gateway, and soon I would be connected with my people again, perhaps even rescued if there were a ship passing by. The silence that had followed the attack had nearly driven to suicide, as for the first time in living memory, I was a gig tie without a working implant. Even our most atrocious crimes didn't merit such a punishment. All at once, the comforting presence and flow of information that signaled a viable connection flooded my mind. Almost immediately, requests for access and details about the expedition registered. I forced breath deep into my body, preparing to relive the disaster that had befallen my company. I allowed access. My comrades and compatriots, suddenly it was I were watching Admiral Edelra making his speech again, just before the launch of our armada, his booming voice coming from the capital ship speakers. We have been chosen, handpicked with more care than the 12 followers of EYWA. We go to claim the spoils of the Great Crusade. Most of you will not remember, but I am old. I remember. A new species had been discovered at the very edges of space. A joyous occasion usually, to be sure. But they rumored that this species were different. It was claimed that this species was a predator. And so, a great fleet was launched, containing ships from every member of the Galactic Council. Those brave beings set off to ensure the safety of the galaxy, and by all accounts they were successful. But it has been nearly 10 decacycles since we have heard from that fleet. We believe that they simply moved beyond the range of the gateway, and now we go to help them reap the rewards of the sacrifice of our kind. We will prosper. We will prosper, was chanted back from every member of the crew. Without warning, I was forced to remember the exit from the gateway. It had been the first sign that the crusade had not been as successful as leadership had believed. It had been surrounded by ships, escape craft mostly, though none of our own ships. All without power. A graveyard. Admiral Edelra ordered a pause, and Captain Ast, my direct superior, was given the task of cutting into the ships to look for survivors and information. We found neither. Everything and everyone was dead, and nothing could discover a reason. We quieted the voices in our minds that wondered why the escaped ships had been jettisoned, why they had not contacted their own people. Those concerns were unvoiced, but the unease they caused could be felt through our implants. We pushed on and discovered horror. It seemed in every direction we looked there were nothing but husks of ships. Our telescope allowed us to look on those ships as if we stood just outside the viewports. Bodies were piled at doorways or torn apart seemingly by their own kind. Others had been turned into debris, with our guesses ranging from brute force to failed reactors. The first time we had encountered a ship that was fully intact, we had taken the time to investigate it. I was fortunate not to be a member of that boarding party. In some places bodies rotted, in others they were well preserved. Officer Kmai's, who served beside me on the bridge, was not so fortunate. He did not speak for nearly 3 shifts after that outing. What disturbs me, Tobiah, is what is lacking. Those were the words we spoke, looking out the viewport at the remains of another capital ship. And what is lacking? I responded carefully. He turned to look at me, pausing, then speaking. The enemy. He did not speak again, and it was true. Ships, remnants, bodies, but none that belonged to our combatants. That exchange was replayed several times by those that had access to my memories. Disquiet permeated the fleet. We knew that the enemy had survived, that most likely they waited for us, and that they had defeated a force several times our size already. In my mind, time jumped again. I watched again as there was a flash on our long-distance scanners, and we detected a burst of radiation and then a ship, a single ship, small by our standards, with no clear weapons. Hardly a threat. Then a ping as a message was received across the fleet. There was no video, just a simple voice, speaking calmly and without inflection. Halt! You are trespassing on United Terran space. We offer only one warning and a promise. Surrender and you will live. Do anything but surrender and you will die. Your ships will become a testament to the folly of your people, and your bodies will remain in space. Deny the traditions of your people, the agonies of your final moments etched forever among the stars. There is no other outcome. You have 2.65 increments to decide. There will no other warnings. The message ended. Admiral Edora did not need the time given to make his decision. I watched as he ordered our ships into an attack formation, close together with capital ships close behind the destroyers and frigates. Their shields and fields of fire would overlap, making them almost impossible to penetrate or overpower. Capitan Asen ordered us to pull back. We were a support ship, meant to refit and resupply, not fight. Our place was behind the main battle line. It saved my life, but no one else's. Through the viewport, I watched my comrades glide gracefully through space, taking up positions. The little ship waited. Admiral Edora ordered the fleet forward. The little ship waited. I watched as plasma and lasers began charging, lights flickering to life across the spine of our great warships, the cool, confident voices sounding through our implants. The little ship fired. A single chemical-propelled missile flowed through space. The fleet didn't even alter direction. A single missile could pose no threat to them. And then it detonated, hundreds of thousands of miles from the front of the battle line. And then the shields were gone. The cool, confident voices were replaced with confusion and perhaps fear, but no panic. Not yet. The little ship fired again. Lasers and plasma fired at the missile, but the target was too small. Our targeting systems designed for mass fire and large targets, not point defense. This missile got closer, just hundreds of miles away, then detonated. I was paying closer attention this time. The closest ships immediately went dark, and all information flow was cut off. Then the ships closest to them went dark, and then our capital ships. To the escape pods now. Capitan Asen had ordered an abandoned ship. I had already been running. I was lucky to get to the escape ships first and launch without hesitation. The invisible wave hit our ship not moments later. Our escape ships are equipped with a propellant that pushes the very limit of survivable. I blacked out. When I awoke, all I could see was a field of floating ships, containing the bodies of those with whom I had served for half my life. There was no movement, though they didn't watch. I waited for nearly a full day, in shock and numb from the loss of my friends, hoping that my implant would spring to life again, full of information from the other survivors. It did not happen. Eventually, I had turned the ship towards the gateway, making my way for home. My grief and loss weighed heavy on me. I barely remember the intervening revolutions. Now that I was connected again, the awful silence was gone. But those that were watching my memories withdraw and did not communicate directly again. I waited, knowing that information was being shared and a decision being reached. Officered by, be aware, we have a relief fleet on standby. They will be exiting the gateway shortly in order to retrieve and debrief you. Prepare for their arrival. I did weep with relief when the fleet gained through the gateway. Large, proud ships, offering the promise of safety and comfort once again. One of the large support ships opened a cargo door and allowed me entry. I had just exited the ship that I had thought would become my coffin when the comms officer reached my implant. Officer by, welcome aboard. Apologies for the lack of downtime. But were there any other ships that escaped from the fleet? I began to shake, my fear broadcasting clearly across the implant. I only asked because sensors just picked up another ship in the system. A small ship. Officered by. I rushed to the nearest viewport, on the edge of despair. I felt my legs collapse under me. A single ship. It fired once,